All right,
I
that's
know how
where,
long the intro is.
yeah, that's where our intro music is going to go.
Edit.
Yep. Well, hello. This is Wealth on the Rocks. Thank you for joining us. This is our very first episode.
Third start in 3 minutes.
Yep. Right. And if you see this, then you know we kept
We
this.
did it.
We kept
We
this
made
edit. But either way, thank you for joining. My name is Brent.
I'm Casey.
This is Casey. Friends for a long time. Decided we wanted to share our journey, and I think we really want to get into really telling stories and really opening up a space for others to share their journey as well. And
Yeah, I think that's probably a good place to start, right? Like Brent says us and we, but really this is kind of Brent's baby. I mean, it's an extension of something that Brent's been working on for years now, right? So he introduces it as though it's this mutual effort, but I'm new to this. I'm new to the journey. I'm new to the conversation. But I think that's what kind of makes this hopefully a interesting and unique dynamic is that he's kind of got this background, and then I am kind of the guinea pig a little bit for the journey itself. But I think that's kind of the place to start, right? Like to explain what it is, what we want it to be, what we're looking for from it, and what we want to invite the audience, to participate with. So Brent, maybe does it make sense to explain the rhombus link and then segue that into On the Rocks, or do we want to kind of isolate this for On the Rocks?
sure, no, I mean,
Totally catching you off guard with
no,
that
no, no.
question, sorry.
I thought that was perfect. I mean, I can, and that's what started this is really my journey. And Casey says he's new to this, but we all have a journey, right? So, and when we talk about wealth, we're talking about the comprehensive wealth, not just finance. So we'll go through the 12 wealths because really one feeds into another, and it really gets us going, and it kind of defines us and kind of defines who we are and what we're doing and helps us find our purpose. So yeah, I'll talk about the rhombus link really quick. I consider myself a storyteller. That's my passion. I feel like that's my purpose. And it really started when I wanted to tell some stories that were in my head, but I had this, yeah, this is my, see,
Shameless plug.
that's my guy. It really started with, I want to tell stories and I want to share these stories with the world. And my limited belief was, well, how can I do it? I can write it because I consider myself a writer. And the fact that we're doing a podcast when we both just sat up here and said, well, we're probably not good talkers, but I always thought that writers do kind of struggle with talking. But this is me going out on a limb and really just going for it. And it's the whole purpose of On the Rocks. But
Yeah,
I wanted,
I'm option like D on that, right? I'm none of the above. So I've never written a book. Not the best storyteller, but when Brent approached me with the idea here,
you have
and,
a very
and
good
this is a bigger,
vocabulary though, too. You have a
I have
very
a
big,
good vocabulary. Thank you. But I think that when he approached me with the idea, and to be fair and clear, it's not just B and I either. There's a couple of the guys that Brent's kind of pulled into this, and that we're trying to brain trust this exploration of what the wealth journey is. And Brent mentioned the wealth journey as being the 12 facets of wealth. It's social wealth, it's mental wealth, it's financial wealth, it's physical wealth. It's all these different things that make up the human experience, so to speak. And I think that was what really piqued my interest, is that it's not about being an expert. Like I said, I've never written a book. I've never done a podcast, never done a YouTube channel, none of this stuff. And I think it's kind of new to you too. So
yeah, we've talked about it for a while. But.
yeah, but that's what this is. That this is the journey that we get to share, and hopefully that others can share with us. That's kind of the point, I think, that we want to drive home too, is that it's not us presenting this expert level of information on all these things. It's a conversation about what we've learned, not just over the past week or 2 weeks or whatever we can get this cadence to be with a podcast, but what are our life experiences that have led us into this conversation, and how did we end up where we are, and who has influenced us within those confines and those concepts of wealth itself. And so I think that's kind of my interpretation of it. But I think to kind of introduce where we are on that journey and who we are, I can do mine, I guess. That's kind of what I'm doing anyways.
I thought that was well said too.
Yeah, like I feel like a novice, right? I feel like this is very foreign, talking to a screen or a microphone, part conversationally and part narratively, I guess.
Well, I'm gonna stop you just for a second because
Yeah.
sure we're talking into a screen, but that's kind of
That's you guys.
yeah, that's part of this journey is, right now we're talking to a screen, but we want to incorporate an audience because we know everyone is on some kind of journey, and anyone that wants to join us or tell their story or be a part of this in any kind of facet is welcome. And so that we're basically exchanging or interacting with a growing audience so that it's not us talking into a screen, and we're actually talking to a real audience that's fascinated in it as well.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking as I mentioned that we've recorded like 3 times in the first 3 minutes already, but it's about we're already learning on how to function within this thought. I think a couple weeks ago we took a stab at it and we didn't even turn it on. I mean, it was the logistics of it. It was set up. It was time. It was all these things that we just hadn't really understood or considered. And so this is it. This is kind of. I mean, I feel like it's off to a decent start as far as a pilot goes. It's probably
Sure.
I don't know who thinks this is super engaging yet, but
I mean, maybe we get there.
at least Trish and Ray will listen to it.
Right.
Maybe.
Somebody, yeah. Well, and Mike and
Trenton
Trent.
But I think what prompted that part of it was I reached for my phone because, like, we've laid out. Brent did a good job kind of laying out what the pilot in a couple episodes might look like, but it's so hard to kind of get ahead of that and to have a really solid understanding of what exactly we want it to be or look like or sound like just yet. Yeah. So I reached for my phone just to kind of say, what is it that we wanted to get into? And so we've talked a little bit about On the Rocks and what it is and what the journey is going to look like. Do you feel like we've done well with the introductions?
So the Rhombus Link again started because I wanted to write. I wanted to tell stories. And I got 4 pillars for the Rhombus Link, and that's storytelling, finances, purpose, and symmetry. And On the Rocks was kind of born to really be a lot of those things. So it's really the first project for the Rhombus Link, and that was a business that I really started to start writing. So I wrote some books. I wrote for SEO for small businesses trying to get an online presence. But I felt like I was holding myself back because I had a bigger vision and I didn't know how to see that vision through. So really it started with enhancing my self-development, and then it turned into this wealth journey that it's kind of all I want to talk about. So then On the Rocks was born, and as I was thinking of it, I started to I shared it with Casey and my brother. My brother is in this too, and I've watched his transformation just from him starting, his wealth journey, and that's the whole point of On the Rocks. Whether we're helping you start the conversation or helping you continue the conversation is important. And wherever we are on our journey, we can meet up here on the Rocks and commingle and share either pointers or just our journey in itself, and it's going to help. Because I've learned from seeing people's journeys where they are, and I know some have with me sharing my journey as well. So we really just want to continue it, and that's where On the Rocks is now. We've started it for a month or so, kind of gathering our mastermind, but that's where that's where we want to grow it. Like we want to get everybody on board and really see this through. But we don't have all the kinks worked out either. But I think that's kind of on brand for us right now is we are going for it. I mean, we're taking the bull by the horn and just going for it.
So I think there's a couple things I want to touch on in that, and in some of the notes that Brent has shared and we've discussed, we talk about vulnerability, not just in this, in this arena of the podcasting and the YouTubing and the amateurism that probably presents itself here, but the vulnerability in the storytelling itself and being transparent and being honest and being vulnerable. like literally just vulnerable and saying, look, I don't know what I'm doing. And so I think that is kind of what the construct of the week to week and the month to month is, that one week we talked about, doing book clubbing and journaling and different conversations around that kind of stuff. And so one week it's going to be about what our experience is on the books. And next might be, a conversation around work and life and kids and marriage and things like that. And so it's really about that full, total, holistic human experience, in the sense that that's what that wealth journey is intended to be. We keep coming back to that, but it's not, Brent mentioned earlier, it's not about financial wealth. That's not the entire focus of what we want to talk about. Obviously that's part of it, but I think that's a key factor that we want to make sure is clear to anybody that takes this journey with us, is that we want to learn about all these different aspects of life and experiences and being human and failing and learning and growing and taking 2 steps back to take 1 step forward. And so I think that's important, just to make sure that we're clear about that. We have a pretty good layout. We know what we want it to look like. We know what it wants to convey, and what we want from you guys that are going to join with us. We're pretty solid on that front. But what the minutia is going to look like, and when we get into the weeds of the conversations and the honest, genuine, vulnerable aspect of what we want this to look like, it's hard to define. So I think that's important just to call out. And so that's hopefully that creates a clear enough picture of kind of what we're trying to make this into. And hopefully I've done that justice, because again, I think that Brent has done, the term that comes to my mind with this whole thing is courage, right? We were talking about something right before we started recording. Oh, the Instagram page. That I had a different Instagram page for photography and stuff like that, but I'd never done anything with it, and I hadn't touched it in years. But that's because I didn't have the courage to take it where in my mind, I thought it wanted to be, or I wanted it to go. And I think that's probably true of most people, is that you have this back of the mind, once upon a time in another life, could have done this one thing that I thought could have made me money or made me happy or done these things. And I think that's what Brent has done with this. It said, this is important to me, and I'm going to protect it, and I'm going to see it through, and I'm going to push it forward. And that's probably had ebbs and flows and peaks and valleys and come and gone. And I think this is it hopefully coming to fruition for long-term sustainability for you.
Well said. Yep. And I think that's a good segue into, I guess, let's give our introductions. What I asked Casey and what we kind of talked about to give us an introduction and kind of stay on this wealth journey path. I'm just going to go and say where or how my wealth journey started. And to be honest, it probably started when I had kids. I think something I thought of the other day, a question was asked, if you could go back in time and tell your 18-year-old self something, what would it be? And the first thing I thought to myself was, well, what I would want to tell my 18-year-old self, he wouldn't probably act on. It's a different maturity. It's a different type of programming. And I'm in that stage of self-development, trying to kind of deprogram how society has programmed us, and to trying to rewire myself to really give emphasis on wealth. And I think that really started when I became a husband and a father, and kind of really propelled itself, which is weird with a MLM. I was doing fitness and trying to help other people. So here I was posting my workouts and trying to get other people to get on board with me and do the same programs with me. And even though it wasn't MLM, it started something for me, and I didn't stick with it, but I did stick with my fitness. I did change how I ate. I changed how I looked at food, how I looked at energy, how I looked at my body. Here I was at 240 pounds, and I had a baby crawling on the floor, and I had a hard time getting on the floor with her or getting off the floor with her, right? So that's really where it started. And at that point, I always told myself I wanted to read more, but I didn't. But starting the fitness journey and actually seeing goals and just really going one step at a time kind of triggered something in me. And then from there, I did start reading, right? And I never really thought of myself as paycheck to paycheck, but I was paycheck to paycheck. And so I noticed when I gave intention to finances, my finances changed. When I gave intention to my fitness level changed. When I gave, intention to my social, all of a sudden I told myself, I used to always say no, right, to my friends. My friends wanted to do stuff, and there was just sometimes I'd be like, nah, I don't feel like it. I started saying yes more and having fun more, making more memories. And so here it was. I had a vision of who I wanted to be, but my mindset wasn't there. And then one day I quit my job. I started writing and really started to find purpose. Even a couple years ago, I started looking at stocks. Right? I was like, I don't know anything about stocks. Well, now I do. And now it's a big part of my conversation, and it's where I want to take a lot of conversation because it's important to me, right? I didn't, we're going to talk about spiritual wealth and Soulicle wealth and community wealth and generational wealth, and all those things became important to me with really kind of flipping a switch and really just giving self-development some focus. And so, that's kind of how we got here. And when I think about it, like I kind of know where I am in my journey. I can kind of look at, each category of wealth and kind of rate myself. Whereas before, I don't think I could have, because I was winging it. And then once I just started giving it some attention, then I could see growth in all aspects. And then that's what really made me want to be like, okay, I think we have something to share. And me wanting to be a storyteller and not just write everything, I want to take it to different mediums. And so here we are. And I'm gonna pass the mic. Not really pass the mic. You have your own mic to Casey.
So, good Lord. So I think that just all of that just kind of highlights one of the cool things about this, at least for Brent and I. Maybe nobody else will ever care, but we get to learn about each other a little bit too. And so a lot of that, we've had these conversations, right? We've had conversations shooting hoops or having a beer or whatever it is. But it's hard sometimes to really get into that, especially in adult friendships. I think is kind of a weird call out. That's a side conversation I'm sure we'll get into. But when you make friends with people later in life, sometimes it's hard to go back and capture some of that stuff. And so I think that's a really cool aspect of what we're going to go into. And you can listen or not listen. We're going to get to know each other. But I think that's a much more thoughtful depiction of your journey than what I probably have. Again, I'm newer to the conversation, at least, and so I haven't really thought that much about it. And I think that's, to me, again, I've kind of hedged toward that, but I think that to me is the draw about this. This is what I'm excited about, is that I can go back and I can recount a time where I weighed 237 pounds and that I was in terrible shape. I can recount a time that I was homeless for 2 weeks after I dropped out of college for a year, that my family was not thrilled about, that I had to give up my dog at the time. I mean, there's these, like we mentioned, peaks and valleys, and we've been through these difficult, challenging aspects of our lives. And yet here we are. There's a perseverance there, and whether you're conscious of it or you're subconscious of it, you're always on a journey. You're always moving forward. You're always moving towards some direction, whether you know it or not. And I think what you've called out when you mentioned the word intentional, I think that's such a good word. I think when you decide to be intentional about what that direction is and what the end goal is, I think that's when you start to see those changes. And so for me, I would agree. I think it was when I got married. And I married Trish, and Trish had Ava at the time, and Ava was 4. And so I had the good fortune to not only become a husband, but become a father at the exact same time. And so that's an embarrassment of riches to me in my life. And that was really what changed my life and my outlook on life. I think not so much as a switch or an overnight thing, but looking back, it kind of was. So I think that to me is that turning point where you say, you're not just living for yourself. There's a broader spectrum of what you need to consider, and there's a broader responsibility in your life. And that's when you start to think about these things. And that's when that little seed gets planted. I just hit the microphone, so I don't know if that's going to show up. We have no idea. But I think that's where that seed gets planted. And And so I think from there, I've changed jobs. I've had different cars. We've had different houses. So when you look at the financial aspect, I think that we've seen some success with that. And then the physical aspect, it's weird how your ambition and your destination changes, right? Like it used to be, I want to be in really good shape. I want to be cut and I want to be lean and I want to be muscular and I want to be these things. And now your mentality as we get older is I want to be healthy. I want to feel good. I want to not wake up hungover. I want to not feel gross when I eat too much McDonald's or whatever it is. And so you start to make different decisions. And that's when that intention comes into play. You start to say, I'm not just going to wing it anymore. I'm going to think about what I'm doing. I'm going to make deliberate decisions to move forward in a proper manner. And so that kind of narrows it down to two aspects of wealth when it comes to financial and physical. And so there's 10 others that we're going to explore on this journey. And we'll tell these stories, and I'm going to summarize that. That's my introduction. But to segue back into the show, I think, or show, I don't know if it's a show.
It's a show. It's a show.
It's a pod.
Yeah.
But it's on YouTube too. So
it's a U-pod.
Can we pause and say if you could just.
All right. Is that what we? Is this where we do this?
I don't know.
Is this where we do this now?
Smash it.
Yes. Smash that thumbs up button.
Sorry, I get distracted easily.
No, you're good.
That's from hanging out with my son and Ava too much.
Well, you can't hang out with your son and daughter too much.
When they're watching YouTube, Ava used to do that all the time. She's like, smash that subscribe button.
Just regularly, like we're at the park and she's like, smash that.
She had her own little YouTube thing that she started
go ahead,
at one point.
Yeah.
I gotta find those tapes. Anyways, but yeah, so smash the subscribe button. I can't remember what I was talking about now.
We'll have an awkward pause then. We'll wait.
Edit.
We'll wait.
But I think that's where I was going with like the show itself, right? It's designed to explore these stories and conversations, and it's not just about Brent and I. That's kind of a very small snippet in who we are and what we're doing here. But I think the much bigger conversation is going to be in the next episodes and the journey itself and learning about what we want to be and exploring those conversations and options and hopefully destinations at some point.
Yeah.
And kind of, this is like a documentary. Whew. Falling off here at the end.
Oh.
Jesus.
I think you did great.
It's like a documentary of our lives. Right?
But I think that's
legacy almost.
I think that's good storytelling is being transparent and being vulnerable. Like, you're good, bro. You're good. But I mean that's part of storytelling, especially when you're telling your own story. And I mean that's what brings in that connection. Like I didn't know you were homeless for 2 weeks.
Like, living around the car.
Yeah, I mean that's wild.
I'll tell that story one day.
Yeah.
There's a story there.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. As soon as you said it, I was like, yeah, we're gonna need to hear that at some point.
So before because I think we've done a pretty good job. We're probably reaching what we want to be about the length of these shows, right? 30, 40 minutes.
Sure, we're gonna look. 30, 45 minutes, somewhere between.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking one thing that we just wanted to kind of touch on at the same time is we've talked about 12 facets of wealth to at least list them, right?
Sure.
That those of you that are not familiar with that, which I'm not or wasn't until we opened the door to this, but to literally just go through and list it, we can kind of bounce it back and forth.
You want to use it? Here, we're gonna try this. We weren't going to use the graphics. Now we're going to use the graphics. Let's see if we
the visual graphics or the audio graphics.
Yeah, no. These graphics.
So
there you go.
There you go.
Yeah, we'll start with. Oh yeah, there it is. We're not to say anything. You guys know what financial wealth is. Like I mean, this is key. This is kind of what
I think it's the most prominent.
Sure. When you think of wealth,
talk about wealth, this is what people think of.
Absolutely.
But so financial wealth, again, the one we kind of defer to when we talk about aspects of wealth, or somebody mentions the common term of wealth, it kind of goes to financial. So what's do I hit a button?
Nope. Look, boom. Look at this.
We got two control boards.
Yeah,
you guys can't see it, but there's two control boards. This is audio.
Push of a
That's
button.
visual?
Yeah. What?
I don't know. That controls the visuals.
Yes.
This controls the audio.
Yep.
We're learning. This is our journey.
To be honest, I never even looked at it like that. But you're right. This will control.
I thought you were being condescending.
Oh no, not
like yes.
No, I'm not a
good job.
I'm not a jerk.
All right, so go ahead.
Yeah. So social wealth, and that's I really kind of look at it as recycling value within your inner circle. So it's not just being social. And I mean, when I think of social wealth, I don't necessarily think of partying, but I think of when I think of my inner circle, I mean, I look at Casey, and Casey brings value. And I like to think that I bring value to Casey. And I mean, the same, I mean, when I talk to, if I talk to my older brother, right, that's big bro, right? My big brother brings me value. I want to bring him value too. Same with my little brother. Same with my sisters. Like it's the same. So when I think of social wealth, I think of being able to, within your circle, be able to share value and be able. You know what? I just realized something. YouTube, if y'all are okay. Well, my intention for this, I know I'm definitely going off script. Maybe this gets edited.
There is
maybe,
no script.
Maybe it doesn't. Right. But I was almost thinking like, what if we kind of, as we go through this, rate financial wealth for right on you.
Like for myself?
Yeah, like financial wealth, and not that you necessarily, not that you know, if financial wealth for you is a 5 out of 10.
Oh, that's how important it is to me. Not how I would rate myself.
No. Kind of like if this is ground zero for us, where are we in each wealth category? Now, when we come back and do this, right?
I like that.
If we have a score of like 60,
I was gonna say, do we need to write it down? But
well, I was almost thinking it. Well, I mean, do we reveal that? If I say
we need the whiteboard.
If I say, yeah, we do need a whiteboard. We need headphones. We're going through a checklist of things that.
But we cut down on the checklist.
Our checklist included things like connect microphone. we need microphone cords because they don't work.
We couldn't mount them. They were laying on the ground.
Yes, but
all right. So clarify that for me. Are we talking about how important it is to us, or are we talking about where we are in that? Like, if 10 is, let's talk about financial wealth for a second. 10 is that I am. I like that. 10 is I've got a $10 million house on the beachfront property, 50 acres, never have to worry or work a day in my life. That's 10. And are we going to 0 or are we going to 1? Is it 0 to 10 or 1 to 10? 1 to 10.
1 to 10.
And so 1 is what? Those penniless.
Homeless, yes.
Okay.
But I would almost think, right, because that's
a bad idea.
But to be more specific to your goals. So you have a financial goal, right? It might not be the same as Warren. I mean, Warren Buffett might sit up here and say, you know, where am I at financial wealth? He might say 9, right? Because he might be like, no, I still want to grow it. Whereas if I were to hit Warren Buffett's level of finance, I'd be like 20.
Right. That's hard to define at the same time. I feel like we're kind of beating around the bush here. Yeah. I think we know what to do.
Sure.
But in my mind, I'm thinking, like, do I go with what I think is a realistic 10? Like, you know, retire at 55, right? Like, is that realistic? Versus, you know, if Trish is a realtor, if we can build that business up and I can leave my job in 5 years, I don't know if that's realistic per se, but that would be a great thing for me. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like that's where I'm torn.
Well, so it can even be.
Let's stick to just us. Go ahead. Where are you going with that?
I was going to say it could even be like, sure, that's like the goal, but you know, if we were to rate it, so maybe we don't rate it now because now we don't have.
Well, I feel like we don't have a good thing.
No.
I did.
I don't think so. I don't think we have.
Let's rate it. Huh? Where are we at right now?
But what I was going to say is this gives us a base. So if we go through all 12 categories of wealth, right? So you got a total of 120 points, and at the end we say, you know, after rating myself, I'm at a 75. Well, in a month, so am I at a 76?
Okay, so your max rating, so it's like a Madden. Your max player rating is 120.
Yes.
So I gotta say, all right, I'm a 7 in financial, but
right.
And I think I'm 6.5, 7. So I'll go 6. I'm a 6 in financial wealth, right? I'm not the most frugal person in the world, but I'm not wasteful at the same time.
Sure, but to also include like not only just your goals, but how you look at it, how you.
Now you're getting into like
Yeah, it's getting
weighted rankings, like goal, KPI type stuff.
well. Not to, well, because finance.
Where are you right now? What's your gut feel?
For me,
Yeah, financially.
I'd probably say
your level of financial wealth, not like how much money do you make right now, but like where are you in your journey of where you want to be?
sure. I would. I mean, I'd probably say like a 5, as far as how I approach it. But it's. I think my rating is not necessarily if I'm at where I want to be. It also includes how I look at it and where I give focus to, because my focus is probably a 9 out of 10 when it comes to finances, because here I am. I mean, I'm watching CNBC in the morning. I want to know how the markets are moving and compare that to where I was, before kids. I was probably spending it and partying it away, and
Yeah.
I mean, right. Whereas now, I'm not.
This is fun. I like this.
I'm not just blowing it. I'm not.
This is the show.
Yes.
In a nutshell, right here. Figuring this out. Because even the way that you just described how you rated yourself is different than how I feel like I rated myself. Like, I don't think that I pay a lot of attention to my financial wealth. I think first and foremost, Trish handles a lot of our family finances, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe people are gonna make fun of me for that. I don't know, but that's her background. Like she did that as a profession. That's what she's good at with us. That's what kind of our balance is. I'm sure we'll talk about like that, how you balance like responsibilities and roles within marriage and families and stuff. But Trish does a lot of the financial aspect, and so I don't pay as much attention to it unless it's warranted or needed.
Sure.
And so I'm not as focused on that on a day-to-day basis. I haven't watched CNBC maybe ever, but we've had these offline conversations, right, where we talk about these these markets and these trends and these stocks and things, and so I'm trying to get back into that. But I think for me, on the other side of the financial wealth token, I'm hyper focused on work a lot of the time. So it doesn't necessarily equate to more money. It just means that without that focus, if I didn't focus on my work and I got fired, then that's impacting my financial wealth and my mental wealth and all these things. But I think just to reel this in a little bit, sorry, I'm going to stick with my 6 in the sense that I think that's my aptitude of financial wealth in both my behaviors and my comprehension.
Okay. I like it. That's
a good way to put it. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So what's next? So social?
All right. Social.
I'm a 2.
Yeah. And
I'm not good at this.
Well, not to say that I wouldn't say
any of my friends across the country they're going to comment on it. It's going to be the most commented piece of the whole thing. Man. I don't text back. I don't call. I'm really bad about it.
I know. Sometimes it takes you a long time I'm like, yo, we meeting up today? We doing this? And it's like, all right.
It's just a weird thing. And I don't think that that's unique to me. And I don't mean for it to come across that way, and it's not that I don't care. I don't give a shit about anybody. It's simply.
Trisha also warned me. She was like, yeah, Casey is bad with texting back. I was like, okay.
Warned you today or like before we ever met?
No, no. This was probably like months ago. Like she mentioned it and I was like,
I'm terrible at it.
I was like, okay.
I thought you meant like, so man, we got to do like the family introductions too. So our wives used to work together, which is what led to all of this, really.
Yeah, I think it's natural for husbands to meet through wives.
That's the whole adult friendship thing that I was touching on. It's not organic. It's not natural. But anyways, yeah. So I'll stop because I'm not trying to berate myself about it either. I feel guilty about it constantly.
Yeah.
This is probably the most impactful thing, other than how I handle my relationship with Trish and my kids. This is the most impactful thing because I put my family into this bucket, my siblings and my parents into this bucket too, and that I'm not great about communicating and keeping that circle as fluid as I would want it to be. So,
yeah, and I would definitely rate myself pretty low too, but I would also say that it has probably gotten better since we've moved back, because I went into a period where I was just hyper focused into my own development, and plus we were in a city and state where we weren't with yeah. So it was like being back home with family and friends. It's like, okay, that's something I need to work on. So I'm in the same boat. I'd probably say a 2, but I'm actually going to upgrade it into a 3 now because I have given it more attention. And I think I said something to you the other day. I was like, "Yo, here we were struggling with the audio for this, right?" And I shared it on social media, and then my big brother called me and was like, "Bro, this is what I do." It's like, this is what I do. And so how can I rate myself very high when it's like I couldn't even go to like? So I was like,
and then you feel bad that you didn't reach out.
yeah, I'm like, yes, I do know, and I'm like, but I always consider, I'm like, yo, you're one of the busiest people I know.
Yeah, but that's what's weird about this one too, right? Like again, it comes down to how and what you're rating and what the conversation entails, right? Like my responsiveness and my communicativeness is not great, but in social situations and in social settings, when we get into those like groups, I think we're both outstanding in those circumstances, right? We're relatively easy to talk to and approachable and conversational and fun to be around and stuff like that. So and that's not to pat us both on the back. It's just as bad as I am about the upfront communication when it's there and it's in our face. I think we're both pretty solid. So, I mean, I'm sticking with my 2 just because.
And I think social wealth has a wide definition as well. So that'll probably be something that we dive into more. And
I think that's the other thing. Like we'll probably spend at least one episode on every one and maybe multiple and come back to different ones at different times.
Yeah. Yep.
Physical wealth, 12. That's huge. Jacked. Thank you.
Look at that. I'm shaking the screen and stuff like that.
What do you think? What do you think you are physical? You're much better at this than I am.
Well, I mean, I don't necessarily think that I'm better. I do put focus on it, but
that's fair.
I make sure I get 30 minutes of exercise at least each day. And there's some days where I get an hour and there's some days where I take a rest. I mean, it matters. It matters to me. So I try to really make sure that I keep up with my physical, but I mean, I don't know.
I agree. I think that's how this one's tough only in the sense that it's one of the most important to me. And I don't mean that in a vain way where like I'm so worried about how I look. I think it's the most important in the sense that it's the most tangible. It's the one you can feel the most. And I don't mean that obviously literally physical wealth would suggest that, but you can tell when you feel good and when you don't feel good. And that's predicated on your attention to your physical wealth. So if you're working out, if you're eating right, if you're walking, I mean, you can tell the difference day to day and sometimes hour to hour if you're really focused on this. And so I think it is one of the more important ones. I think they're all, I love this conversation.
Yeah,
they're all equally important, but this is the one that kind of stands out to me in the sense that it's the one that really impacts you directly and most immediately, I think. And so as far as what I would rate myself, again, ebb and flow. There are periods of time where I'll go through like a couple of weeks where I'm pretty good at it, and others that I don't even get up from my desk at work, let alone go down to the gym in the morning before I go. I'm probably a 4, good 4, I guess.
All right, you and I might rate this a little differently because when I look at it, it's like, no, I can't play and I say can't. Like it's almost a can't that I can't play basketball anymore because I'll play basketball and then I can't walk for
probably.
Yeah, you're probably right. But like if I go to play basketball, then it's just a big no-no. I'm done for a week. I'm not walking upstairs. I'm not doing right. So am I at that level as that I was? No, but when I was younger, that was my movement.
Identity almost.
Right. So I might have been more active then, but I probably would have said then it probably would have been a 5. Yeah. But I mean, I'm going to upgrade it now and say 7 because at least the mindset is there. Like I mean, we'll go on vacation, and as soon as I get back, it's like, yo, I got to get this vacation weight off. Yeah. So I mean, I'll say 7, but just like for everybody, I mean, this might be something that maybe fluctuates more than other wealth categories. This one might be a 5. And I mean, for a while when I hurt my toe, like it was
the most volatile.
Yeah. Yes. Yep. I agree. Like it's so. Yeah. Nice. You said 5, and I said 7.
I said 4.
Oh, you said 4.
You have a much healthier self-awareness than I do.
Well, I mean, but
the crap out of myself.
Well, I think maybe I had the advantage of thinking of this maybe before. Like, but yeah, we're going.
That's fair.
Yeah. Freedom wealth.
Freedom wealth.
Yes, this is or time. So the time you have to
Gotcha.
actually spend on the things that you value. So you know, not to say that someone who works a lot doesn't have freedom or the freedom that they want, because if you love your job, then you probably do. And as long as you get to come home and work on the things that you want to, then I think your rating for this can be pretty high as well. But yeah, I mean, this is basically the time that you feel like you're in control of your time. Like, do you control your time? Do you do what you want to do? Do you have hobbies that you like to work? Do you have hustles, side hustles that you are free to do? Or are you really in the rat race so much that you don't feel like you have that freedom? And I've definitely been there, and maybe that fluctuates a little too.
What do you think? What are you?
Freedom wealth. I'm gonna say well, I was about to go five, but I'm actually no. I'm gonna keep it at five. But it really comes from I I I'm one of those who, all right, I got a day off, then I'm setting my alarm, because my days off, I work harder than the days that I do work, if that makes sense. Like the days I have off, I'm making sure I work out early. I'm making sure I catch up on my reading, my self development. That's when I get to look at the market. That's when I'm on Yahoo Finance. That's when I'm looking at stocks. That's when I'm looking at new ways to invest. That's when I'm looking at I'm working my business. That's when I'm looking into real estate. That's when I'm helping my wife figure out what she wants to do. So I say that because I can easily come home and be tired, but I do make a conscious effort. But I think I do want to get to the point where I can do all the things that I
Yeah.
that I value, and I'm just not there yet. So I mean, I'm putting it at a five right now, kind of in the middle of the pack.
I think that last point's pretty good, right? Like, it's probably the most universal of the wealth, right? The time, right? The recognition of time, and the limitations of time, and the fleeting of time. So I think that's the thing that people are most aware of, in the sense that they want more of it. They want to be able to control it more. I think
Yep.
that's across the board. Like, for financial wealth, for example, some people would say, no, I just want to be able to make my car payment each month, and I'm happy. And other people would say, I'll never be happy no matter how much money I have. But I think when it comes to time, I think everybody always wants more, only because it's the one thing you can't get more of. And so I think that's relational. But I also think that this one's contingent on other people, right? So, like, the fact that we can even sit in this room and have this conversation now is because our wives are in the other room. My wife is watching our 1-year-old, and your wife's kind of helping keep her distracted when it comes to that. And it's getting late, right? So that I think to be able to have your own time, you kind of sometimes have to rely on other people. But I think that I'm much better about this now than I used to be. And that doesn't mean that I have more time, or that I've made intentional decisions around creating more time for myself, or Trish, or the kids. I think it's just that, again, it's almost like this aging thing, right? Like, the older I get, the more aware of it I am. And so the things that I used to get upset about, or we used to get in fights about, or bicker about, no longer matter. Or we try to be aware of those and kind of shift away from them. So, I commute for my job. So I commute, what we talked about earlier, hour and 15 minutes, give or take, one way to get to work, and then obviously on the way back too. So I don't have the luxury of that. I don't have the luxury of not taking advantage of the time the second I walk in the door. And that's hard, right? Trish and I, that's probably
Maybe
the
in
thing
the
that's the most
moment.
challenging thing, right? In that moment, you're like, oh, I just want to sit down, and I'm exhausted, and I'm running on fumes, and I'm at a 10, and I just don't have it today. But I know that she's the same. And so we have to have that balance to say, no matter how you feel, you need to take advantage of the moment and really try to experience the relationships that you can while you can. And that's where, the kids and the family and the hobbies and the things that you want to focus on have to come into play.
I mean, and like you said, I mean, you have a 1-year-old, so
Yeah, it's hard.
yeah, that's somebody.
My time now, the commitments of my time now are very different than they were a year ago, or 2 years ago, or 10 years ago. And so I think when I say that I'm better at it now, I've changed jobs a couple of times over the last 7 years or so. And I used to commute as well, about the same amount of time. But I used to let that be a deterrent from appreciating the other time. I'd be so in my head about, oh, my back hurts from driving, or I'm so pissy about, being stuck at work too long or getting caught in traffic, that impacted the other aspects of time and family and relationships. And so now I'm not great at it. I'm not perfect at it by any means, but I think I'm much better about when I'm here trying to be present and intentional and all those things that you hear about growing up and you kind of take for granted. And so pushing 40 now, you're like, all right, if it's finite and I've only got so much of it, then I need to make sure I appreciate it. So as far as what I would rate myself, I'll go 5, maybe 5 or 6. I'll go 6.
Fair.
All right.
And I think you touched on something that we talked about earlier, because you mentioned the social aspect, right? So, I mean, you can kind of see how, focusing on either social or freedom,
that's where that
boost.
net zero, that pie chart concept is, if I take from one to give to the other, they are kind of related to each other in that sense. But yeah. What's the next one?
Good stuff. So, spiritual wealth. So this is heart, right? This is your relationship with God, your morals, your principles. It's really what really moves you into, kind of your purpose and what you actually value. And if I'm going first, I mean, this is something that again has fluctuated, that I've actually recently started giving more focus to, because I do realize that I have principles, but now the focus has been, well, what actually are those principles? And I've gotten to a point where I've written them down and I know them now, but maybe 2 years ago I didn't. And definitely 5-10 years ago, I knew them even less, and even though they were what moved me, right? It's not that they've really changed or anything, but I know what they are now because I've written them down. It's like, okay, right, now that makes sense, because I'm like, I know where my morals are, I know where my relationship with God is, I know how I feel about anything, right? How I feel about Casey, how I feel about how I am as a brother, as a sibling, as a father, a husband. And then if I had to rate myself, and I realized that I am very far ahead of my mic, but
I haven't even thought about the mic.
I'd probably rate myself here, and I'm gonna go 7.
Yeah. So this one's weird, right? Like, because there's a literal interpretation about the spiritual wealth, and so that suggests the religiosity of it. How's your relationship with God? How's your relationship with whatever God? Not necessarily practice whatever religion you feel inclined to do so, but what does that relationship look like, and how devoted are you to it, and what kind of time and effort are you putting into it? I'm not good in that regard. Trish and I have had a lot of deep conversations over the last couple of years about this, and we had some challenging times, I think, before Eleanor was born, where we lost a couple of pregnancies. And I think that was the time that I think it challenged it most, probably in my life. And so I like to look back and think of, when I was younger, life was different, right? I was in youth council, and I played handbells, and I was an acolyte, and I was really engaged with the church, and I was an FCA and all that stuff. But, it's hard as you grow and you see the realities of what the world are, that relationship with the spiritual aspect of your life becomes more and more difficult. And so I'm not great at that. I'll pause there on that part of it, just because that's something I got to be a little more introspective on before I kind of go too far down the literal conversation of it. But I think when it comes to the ethical side and the moral side, I do think that I hold myself to a pretty high standard. I think that I'm accountable to myself, and I try to hold those around me accountable to what I think are reasonable expectations and behaviors and respect and things like that. Again, I'm not great at it, but I think 7's a fair ranking as far as that goes. And I think that's where it's kind of like, it's one thing to rate ourselves, and then for ones like that, it's almost like you kind of want somebody else to rate you.
Sure.
But I'll go 7.
You're saying how good of a person
good or
am
not
I?
good. Like
Right?
I'm a 7, but 3 times out of 10, I'm an asshole, I guess. But,
Yikes.
yeah. All right.
I think we work well to go too.
Did you make that up?
So no, but nor did I know of it until I researched it. And this is really kind of how you control your emotions, right? So when I think of Soulicle, it's really what pleases the soul, right?
It's a hard one, right?
Yeah, this one is a hard one. This is one up until I researched it. I found an article and they included Soulicle, and I was like, interesting. So I want to know more. So and maybe that's what this is right now. So for On the Rocks, maybe Soulicle is a kind of a question mark, because if it ties into our emotions and in your emotions tie into your soul, I mean, then you have to figure out, that's kind of like a practice.
Yeah. So this one almost ties into spiritual a little bit. But what would you rate yourself?
I mean, I don't know. Since this is a question mark, I'm actually going to say lower than what I wanted to say, and I'm gonna say a 4.
So so that's funny because again, this is exemplary of the conversation as a whole, of the podcast as a whole, of the journey as a whole, because I don't have a great understanding of what Soulicle Wealth is. Mm-hmm. And so it is hard. It's hard to rate myself. So I'm going to rate myself a 5. I'm going to preface by that only because I don't know if I'm good or bad at it. So I'm
sure.
going to say I'm right in the middle. But to me, it's like, what's the Will Smith? Is it 7 ounces? Mm-hmm. You ever see the Will Smith movie? And so that's based upon the concept that, or I don't think it's, I feel like I did read somewhere that it was like a literal study that was done that when the human body passes, it lightens by 7 ounces, and everybody thinks that's, you know, the soul leaving the body, and people have different opinions and theories on it, but 7 ounces is the thought and the concept of that's what the soul weighs when it escapes the body after you pass. And so that's where I go, and my mindset is, where does your soul go if you believe in heaven and hell, and you believe in afterlife, and you believe in whatever religion that you practice dictates, what happens to your soul when you die? And that ties back into, I think it was spiritual wealth, right? What kind of person are you? How do you treat others? What's important to you? What are your morals? Things like that. And so that's my current interpretation of it. But this one, I'm kind of excited to learn more about along the journey. And that way we can give better conversation to it, better attention to it, and then maybe a better rating to it as well.
Yeah,
I think the rating thing.
Yeah, and I think you influenced me to. I like what you said. That, you know, am I good or bad at it? And you gave yourself a 5. Why am I docking myself that point? So I'm gonna take that point back, and I'm gonna rate myself a 5 there as well. All right. And I actually thought influential wealth was next, but it's not. It's creative wealth. Yeah, and this is one that's important to me, right? Like the ability to create from imagination, and so I've always, since I was a kid. Like I've always looked at myself as a creative, building from your imagination. So, you know, being able to actually create from your imagination brings on a lot of the idea of wealth in all of these categories. If you think about it, being able to be creative and imagine it, and then actually having the courage to act on it. So if I'm rating myself on creative, I mean, I'm going to rate myself high on this one, and I'm gonna go ahead and say an 8 at this point.
I think it's fair, and I think that you're right, and I'm kind of going that same path. But for me, it's the opposite. I used to be a lot more in tune with this. My mom was a college art professor, and so growing up, that was kind of ingrained in us as different ways to be visually creative, not just mentally creative. But that side probably got drawn out more on my dad. From my dad's side, is that he was, I mean, I think we always had that bias toward our parents, right? But I think my dad is probably one of the better educators that were in the Mid Ohio Valley. During his tenure, he was always elected to be the teacher that walked him out. But he challenged us to think and to question and to learn and to study and to be accountable to those things. And so that mental creativity to really, you know, stretch the confines of your mind and your thought, and then the physical creation or the physical creativity that I think my mom helped ingrain really are the foundational concepts of who I am and how I think, right? I think logically, and I think that I consider things analytically, and I think that's in my opinion, one of my strong suits. So again, I don't want to go too far down these side conversations because I'm kind of talking myself in circles a little bit, but I think on this one I'll go an 8 as well.
Cool, I like it.
So, but I think that's, for me, it's foundational, and it's not as visible now. I think yours is, you are much more creatively oriented than I am present day. But for me, I do think it's kind of like who I am in my core.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean that's to me that's how I feel too. I feel like it's me to my core as well, and it's somewhere it's something that I feel like I can right, especially seeing my oldest daughter being so similar, like that brings a real connection, and that's I mean when I think about it too. The next creative person I can think of, actually the most creative person I can think of, is my big brother, right? And I feel like that's probably why he has such a big influence on me, is because we do share that in common. And so, yeah, I feel like that's ingrained in me.
So that was your influential, right? Is that what you thought that one was?
No. Yeah, I thought that one was going to go, but this is influential wealth, and maybe we'll talk about the next one too, because the next one is community wealth, and they're kind of the same, but influential wealth is more or less how we impact others, but on the large scale. So how we are, as a leader on a large scale. And again, this is not one that I thought of. It was did some research and found influential wealth. And really, when you kind of think of your leaders, right, and you think of somebody who globally is a great leader, right? Of course, I'm not there like globally, but if I do take it out of the community aspect, if I can have, a big leadership, maybe this allows me to have some kind of platform to reach a bigger audience. And maybe this one is unrateable at the point, and maybe this is a big question mark, or maybe it's low. And I do see myself as some type of leader, but maybe not necessarily in a large scale, maybe more on the community wealth that we'll talk about next. So this one I'll put pretty low and kind of say 1.
Really? That catches me off guard. So this one's weird to me too, because it can go one of two ways, at least in a literal sense, and that's what influenced me versus what I think I influence. I think is, but you're going down that second path, so I'm gonna stay true to that and say, how influential am I? How broad stroke can I say that I can influence others, and whether good or bad, right? Like if you do something good, does it impact those around you? And if you do something bad, does it impact them even more? So I think being patriarchs and things like that of our families, and I think you have a presence about you, and I think that you should be fair to yourself about that. I'm not going to challenge your rating.
Sure.
but I think that rating did surprise me, just being honest. But I don't know that mine would be much higher. And I think this one is one that you and I in particular are mutually harder on ourselves on, right? That you don't give yourself enough credit.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
But I don't think I'm much further out. And part of that, you're right, is, and I think we can kind of loop community into this one as well, because I think that's your reach, right? That's your outreach, that's your circle. So you can't influence beyond your circle right now because we don't have that platform. So again, maybe this is it. But I would say that mine's probably a 3.
Okay, and maybe I made it too large. Maybe it's more or less like a stranger, someone who's not in my community, but I can definitely influence a stranger.
Yeah, I think, but that's where I think what surprised me about it is that even in reading your book, right? Like you have the ability to influence through your storytelling and through your words, and I think that's where this is the bromance moment, but I don't think you should sell yourself short with that, right? I think that you have a much specialer gift than what you're allowing yourself to at least consider in this rating.
Okay. Well, maybe it's something. I'm gonna keep it at a 1, and then maybe that's something
fine.
that
Then never mind.
no. I'm saying maybe that's something that maybe I need to give this more focus, and maybe I really need to look into.
I think part of it is
it's
that we need to define these.
Sure.
Right? What do we want them to be to us and to those around us, and how do we want those that we want to experience the journey with us to be able to interpret them as well?
Yep. Oh, I agree.
So I'm not meaning to jump ahead, but I think community is the same to me.
Yeah. So the community is the same, except my rating is going to be different, because someone who is in my circle, or at least in my community, somewhere around me, or someone who thinks like me, someone who looks like me, someone in my family, in my circle of friends, right? I feel like I can definitely add some value and show some leadership. So, I mean, in this area, I'm probably going to say more like an 8. And I mean, I'll pull the example of my little brother, right? My little brother is 10 years younger than me, right? And so without him being near me, right? I've always kind of questioned my influence, as a bigger brother. But here lately, I sparked something in him, and he's shown me another side, and it takes me back to, okay, we have a great big brother who kind of defines the definition of big bro. And I wanted to be that too to my younger siblings. And I think that I have, and I think that I've actually grasped it better. And I have shown myself as a leader, and being a father, and being a co-leader in my household. I definitely see that the leadership is there. And I think the big reason that I'll give it an 8 is because I want to too. Like, I want to be the leader. Like, there's certain aspects that I want to reign over and take control over, and be, the initiator of. And so,
So
yeah.
I didn't take this to the family level. I took it in a literal sense, like your exposure and again, to go back to influence on the community as a whole. And so I got to rethink that now. Well, I think family is important, right? It's hard. It's hard to know which to include things like family on when we talk about the aspects of wealth, and which they impact and which they don't, or which aspects of wealth impact family and which don't. And I think it's arguable that they all are intertwined in some way that we just haven't talked about or unveiled yet. But I think the sibling thing is hard for me, just because when I go back to that social aspect, right? That I'm not a great communicator. I'm not responsive. I kind of take advantage of the fact that my family has like a group thread in text and stuff, and Trish usually responds on our behalf, right? And so that I kind of take advantage of that, or take it for granted, not advantage of it. I don't mean to say that, but even growing up, right? Like, I think my three siblings and myself are pretty close in age. My older sister's 2 years older than me. My older brother's 2 years older than her, and my younger sister's 4 years younger than me. So we're all reasonably close, and so we kind of in a way grew up together. And so we deferred a lot to my older brother, as opposed to ever taking the reins from him, I guess, so, in a way. And so we've even in those relationships, there's been peaks and valleys and ups and downs, and goods and bads and stuff like that. But I think the influence and the love and the care and the community that we have for each other within that regard is untouchable. And so I don't know how much influence I have on it. I don't know what, we don't talk about those things a lot, which is kind of weird about, a weird fact about our family is that we don't have those emotional conversations very often. Like, I can see that with you and your brothers, that you guys are very much in tune with that. And my siblings and I are best of friends, protectors of all, and that's unspoken, but we just never go into those diatribes. But anyways, so in that regard, I'd like to think that I'm a part of that core community with my siblings and my family. And then I think when I look at it in a literal sense, I think I am a healthy contributor to society as a whole. That's a hard thing to gauge and to score.
Sure.
To rate, but
Well, I mean, even if you take it on like a work level. So,
but what's crazy, when this conversation started, and we, not just this specific conversation,
sure,
but we started talking about the podcast and how we're going to introduce ourselves specifically. I thought back on it, and I have always been tied to work. Right. Anytime that anybody ever asks you who you are and what you do and all those things, the immediate response is, "Oh, I'm a manager, I'm a director, I'm this, I'm that." And so that was what I was afraid of almost coming into this conversation, is that I was going to defer back to, I'm this position at this place, and this is how many people I oversee, and things like that. And I was afraid of it. I didn't want to do that. And the way that this has been presented, and the way that you've done a good job of setting this up so far, is that it hasn't even crossed my mind. Until you just said that, it hadn't even crossed my mind. But yeah, I think in a positive sense, I think that that's fair to call out, right? Like I do have that influence. I do have the ability to not just impact the team that I oversee, but I work in the healthcare industry. And so I do get to have a hand in the community as a whole in a very literal sense. You know, by doing my job well and making sure my team does their job well, sometimes I can impact whether people walk out of a hospital alive or not. And so that's a good call out. I appreciate that. So I think as a whole, I'd probably say for community, I'm going to stop there and just say that I'd say it's a 7.
I thought that was good. I thought it was very well said too. All right, so generational wealth. I mean, really being wealth building for the future, and well, in case I didn't get caught by the mic, because I keep realizing that I'm ahead of the mic, but I look at generational wealth as wealth building for the future. And me and my wife had a conversation the other day that general wealth isn't just financially. One thing I wanted to really bring up in this segment is I hear her family talk about her grandmother, and it is always with the biggest light. Like it's like you can't be sad when her family is talking about her grandmother. And it made me think, yo, she passed down some generational wealth, even if it was memories. It's not just financials, it's principles. It's who you are. Again, the memory aspect, but it's really what the frameworks. It's really what you set for the future, and I mean after we're gone. And I mean part of that is definitely going to be finances. But if I were to rate myself, where I am on this journey, it's definitely not going to be where I would want it, because I would want some of that to be financially, and not there yet, and it's a big focus. So I mean, I'm gonna say a 4 at this point, if I'm saying where we are now. Like, but I've also I've instilled something. I mean, my kids talk about stocks, to be honest. Like, right? Like, I mean, they own stocks. So I mean, this could be an area that I might be cutting myself short here, but I mean, I kind of preach these things to my kids, it's not just about the right now. We have conversations about growth, and they certainly look at money differently than I did at their age. But yeah, I mean, I'm gonna still stick with a 4 here.
Again, these get harder and harder to rate in some aspects, right? Like, I think generational wealth, in a way, is exactly what we're talking about here, right? Like, yeah, there's generational wealth in a very financial sense, but I think it's right to parse those out. Mm-hmm. I think if we're going to talk about financial wealth, that needs to be financial wealth, and generational wealth should be the bigger concept of generational hand down. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think storytelling is another name for it almost, right? Right?
Yeah.
But that's what it is, right? Like, that when you talk about Ray talking about her family and you talking about your brothers, right? Me talking about my siblings, my parents, that is generational wealth. Do you have those experiences? Do you not have those experiences? And wealth doesn't necessarily always reflect a positive, right? Wealth is the bucket, right? Wealth says what bucket do you have to draw from? And so I think when it comes to generational wealth, it's regardless of whether you had a good or bad experience, it is the experience itself. This is what you have to draw from. This is what your motivation is. This is what your experiences were and your stories are. And so I think that's what transitions you into your hand downs. What you hand to your kids is the stories you tell, the priorities that you lay out, the things that are critical to you, your hobbies, your likes, your loves. I think that's what you hand off to them, because that's what was handed to you in some ways. And so part of it is a podcast, right? To hear our voice and see us and have that legacy. And legacy is a really good word for it too. Mm-hmm. So I think this is the one I struggle with the most too, right? What influence do I have on the kids, and how will they remember me, and how will those around me remember me, and what stories will they tell about me, and things like that. And so that's a hard one. So I'm just going to say 5 for now, and explore that more in the future.
Yeah, yep. And I mean, I agree. Like it's kind of, I say 4, like it's really that 4 or 5-ish range. It really kind of needs to be
We're totally
defined
defaulting
more.
here.
Yeah, but yeah. But I mean, I think it's natural. Again, this is our base.
Yeah,
So
that's fair.
in a month or so, and in a quarter, and 2 quarters, maybe a year. I mean, maybe we have this more defined for ourselves, like what
Yeah.
our actual definition is, right?
Yeah, but I think that circles back to what we want this to be. This is very literally a journey for us where we're going to explore these things and read about these things and talk about these things and then come back to the table and say, I feel like I've developed in this way, or I feel like now that I think about it, man, I'm falling short here. But that becomes the focus, and that's the story then we tell on the backside of it, right?
Yep.
I recognized this. I felt like I was falling short. So here's the things that I did, and here's what I felt like came out of that. So
Yep.
yeah, discipline.
Yeah, discipline.
I don't know how to define that one.
Yeah, it's really your ability to, say no to temptations for understanding the bigger goal at hand, right? So for me, since starting that fitness journey, I've gained disciplinary wealth in other aspects as well, because and it comes with kind of holding myself accountable too. One of the big things that me and my wife say to each other is, yo, we got to do what we say we're going to do. Right. So that means, if we're setting an alarm to do something, then we set an alarm. Right. That doesn't mean snoozing 5 times. Right. Because if I'm snoozing 5 times, or I just wipe the alarm out together, then I'm dropping in discipline wealth. Right.
Yeah.
So, and then that doesn't allow me to, work on my business on the day off, because now I'm not getting up with the alarm. And then it sets everything back. And then it means I'm not reading because maybe I don't feel like it. Maybe I'd rather, watch sports. And I mean, and that's been a big thing for me, more and more, as big as a football fan as I am and basketball fan. I find myself watching it less and less, because I mean, I still enjoy it. So I do, but I do give it less and less attention, because that's one thing I've grown as far as discipline, is really doing the things that I say I want to do. And I don't want other things to get in the way. So for me, I'm going to rate myself pretty high on discipline, and say, I'm gonna say 8. I wanted to say 9, but I'm gonna say 8.
Okay. Holy cow. You got a couple of 8s. I don't think I had an 8. I think this one I have to compartmentalize again. And I'm not meaning to overanalyze, but there are things I think that I'm like super disciplined in, and there are things that I think I struggle with. You mentioned like the alarm and getting up and working out, and I alluded to that earlier, but I don't have it sometimes, and it really is when it comes to the attention that I pay to like the physical wealth and the intentional aspect of being present and things like that. That discipline is so hard sometimes, but I think it's paramount, and it's probably the catalyst to all other wealth. Doesn't make it more important, just that all others feed from that, right? If you're not disciplined, you're not intentional and accountable and responsible to what you're doing, then you can't. I don't know how you could possibly be successful with the other aspects. So I'll probably go 4 with this one. And it really comes down to like just that day-to-day kind of tasky discipline. I think in a bigger sense, I'm good. I know what my goals are. I know how to get to them, and I stay true to those. But day-to-day, I hit my snooze button 6 times this morning. But, so I'll go 4.
I've never understood the snooze thing, to be honest. Like my not hitting it. So my roommate in college lived by the snooze, right? It was good sleep for him to snooze 15 times. Never understood it. My wife, the same way. She apparently she thinks she's good.
You think the second you're up anyways.
Yeah. She'll set an alarm for 6 because she wants to get up at 7. And I'm like, I don't get it. You're gonna snooze 6 times. Like that's what you want to do.
Wake yourself up and deprive yourself of the last hour.
Yes, I'm like just set it for 7 and get up at 7.
I think you're right. Biologically, I think you're right.
I mean,
and there's studies on that. Like you're supposed to force yourself. I can't remember it's one of the. She's not a psychologist. She might be. I can't remember who she is. I can't remember her name, but she talks about the concept of the countdown, right? The 3, 2, 1.
That's what I was about to say. Mel Robbins.
Mel Robbins.
Yep. So I was just about to bring it up
Sorry,
because
thank you.
my wife loves Mel Robbins.
I lived and breathed by that 3, 2, 1 for like 2 weeks, and it works. It does. And then
Same for her.
you know, the whole discipline thing, I just drift away from it, or you don't do it the one time, and you're like, it's fine. Yep. And it's just a landslide from there. But
that's that's
that was a good pull.
So that's got it. So that's so when we talk about influential wealth, right? Not community, but influential. To both think of Mel Robbins, that's influential wealth. I mean,
that's a great example.
That's part of it, at least. Yeah, to both think of Mel Robbins, not having discussed that before, and the scenario she gives. I mean, now it's like, okay, well, she owns that space. Yeah. So that's All right. So
last one.
Yeah, energy wealth, and this is really I kind of look at it as two things: the energy that you bring, right? So your capability of being able to, I guess, kind of pump yourself up, have the energy to do the things that you want to do. But I also think it's the energy that you actually give off. So kind of like your vibe, right? And they're kind of two different things, but it's the energy you can give and the energy that people see in you, right? Because I think some people can see, hey, I can vibe with that guy. His energy's good, or it's not, and so
he's cool.
Yeah, but for me, I would I would love to say that I mean I feel like I do bring a good energy for myself and in a way to connect with other people. So I think this is another one I'll rate a 7.
Good. I was gonna smack you if you went anything lower than like a 5 or 6.
Well, I mean because I do think I think in every aspect of wealth there's room to grow. Like
I agree.
So I got to leave myself some room to grow because I
that's what makes them hard, right? Like, what is the end goal for us? And right now, it's undefinable.
Yeah, well, that's the whole thing. It's right. You always hear it's about the journey. It's not the end goal, right? We don't want to be in a rush to get to the destination. We got to enjoy the journey, on the way. And then even when we do get to the destination, then we're like, well, what's next? Yeah. It's probably furthering out the journey.
That's like the McConaughey concept where he says, he was asked when he was young, who's your hero? And he said, I don't know, ask me again in 10 years. And somebody comes back to him 10 years later and he says, well, who's your hero? He said, tell you what, it's me in another 10 years. I realized that I was my own hero. The person I was trying to be and strive toward became the person that was my hero who I wanted to be most like.
That's dope.
So every 10 years he resets that mindset. That may not be fully accurate, but that was kind of my interpretation of it. But yeah, I think the energy you put out is kind of my concept on this. And this is another one where I wish someone else would rate me because I have no idea.
Sure. Yeah.
I just don't know. I think generally speaking, I try very hard to be positive, but that's, again, not always the case. Sometimes I don't take things seriously enough. Sometimes I take them too seriously. And so I think it's situational and it's circumstantial and it's so many other things that are hard to nail down. But, again, I don't mean to be dismissive of it or to defer, but I would say a 5. Right? I think that for the most part, people enjoy being around me. I like myself most of the time. And I think that there is a positivity. Right, I try to see positive intent, at least in others as well, and so I think that reflects from me is that I don't assume that people are being jerks just to be jerks. I think that everybody fights that battle. You don't know what it is. All that stuff goes into play. I try to be cognizant of that as much as possible, and so in both the way that I interpret other people's energies and in turn try to put mine out, I'll go right down the middle. But I'd be average Joe for this week.
But I think that's fair. I think this is the space to right. If we're given that base for ourselves, well, then from here, where does it go?
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I think it's only fair that if you're going to do that now, if you're going to rate in the middle now, it's the time.
We'll have to come up with rules to the rating system that you have to.
Yeah.
Really
I mean, And maybe that'll be something too. That maybe that's something that we create too for the audience to be able.
I was
to
thinking the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Like so that's kind of the wrap up conversation too, and it's to put it out, right? It's to say to you guys, like, B and I have gotten a chance to kind of introduce ourselves, to have a conversation about what we want and think that this is going to be, at least a little bit. I think it's not bad for first hour and a half of a conversation around something that has only been something on paper or in our minds for so long. And so to see it and to feel it and to converse about it, I think is really cool. And I don't mean that ironically, I mean that literally. I think it's a really awesome thing. And so congratulations to you, first of all.
And congratulations to you as well.
Thank you. And so I think that's the invitation, right?
Right. Yeah.
So we've talked about these things and we've kind of had a conversation on our side, but we want you to be involved with this. We want this to be an engagement and a journey that's made as a whole with the community and friends and family. And we want to know what you think. And we want to invite you to join this conversation in a literal sense. We want guests. We want people to call or comment or be in a room with us to have some of these conversations. And so I think you had a really good line in the write up that was like, if we always think that we're struggling. I made the comment earlier, we're our own worst critics, right? We're harder on ourselves than anybody else is. And so if that's you, if you kind of catch yourself going down that path, sometimes just take a step back. That's what this journey is for us, is us taking a step back, evaluating who we are and trying to learn and improve and grow. And we really want that for you as well. So we're inviting you to come on the journey with us and come on the rocks with us here. So.
Yep. And we mentioned it earlier, like we want to be as transparent as we can. And to be honest, that's a scary thing. And sometimes it really just takes just kind of going forward or doing things, scared. And so, we both want to be transparent and be vulnerable. I think we touched on a few things in just this first episode that we'll want to give more transparency to, maybe at another time and talk about again. But we want to create that platform for others as well, and we're equipped to do it. I know when Casey said it, it was like either to call or comment or or what. But we're equipped to do it. Now, do we know how to do it yet? No, like we
will.
but yeah, like you said, we will. So this was our first step, and at one point I thought I came into this pretty confident, and then we said let's hit record. And things got weird here for a minute. It was like it kind of froze for a moment, but but this is the first step. So it's no going back, and we're gonna say this is gonna be our worst episode, and it only gets better.
Pilot's always rough, right? Like but I can tell you this. I feel 1,000 times more confident right this second than I did an hour and 20 minutes ago when we hit that record button for the first time or the fourth time or whatever it was. It's the first step, right? You can't climb the staircase until you take the first step, and this was the first step for us. And I think that in and of itself is that courageous act and that leap that hopefully will put us on. You join us if this isn't your thing, that's okay too, but This is what we're doing.
Yep.
And I think there's something really awesome about that. So.
Yep, we want to host a conversation. We want you to join the conversation. We have some takeaways, and we hope that you have some takeaways as well. And part of our takeaways is being able to share this and get this out so that you can even find us and join in on the conversation. So,
but reach out however you can. Let us know what you guys are doing to start your journeys. But other than that,
yeah, I think we wrap up. I think we wrap up the pilot and then do the YouTubing things, the follows, the likes, and we'll get this edited, and you can check out any links below that we have attached to this and find us that way. And again, here's another takeaway. We got to get better at the wrapping this up too.
Intro and the outro.
Intro and outro.
We'll see you next time.
Yes. Thank you.
we'll see you next time. Toodles.
Oh man, I'm Toodles.
My thing.
Oh,